Hi! So, a couple of weeks ago, I asked if there was anyone who would like to receive a personal recommendation from me, and quite a few of you said yes. And then I disappeared for a month. But since I'm back, I'm here to fulfill my promise. So Irene said, ultimate escape readings in fantasy or science fiction, please. I need something to really dive into when I want to forget the world for a while. So Irene, when you said that you wanted to really dive into something, I was thinking about series and books that have really strong world building. And the first one that really came to mind was The Mirror Visitor by Christelle Dabos, which is a YA fantasy series. What makes the world building in this series very strong in my eyes is the solid structure of the magic system. The story is set after the occurrence of the rupture, which basically destroyed Earth, and now it consists of all these small pieces called arcs. And each arc is led by this sort of deity called the family spirit. And the thing that makes these arcs so unique is that they all have different relations to time and space. For instance, the main character, Ophelia, comes from Anima, and that's a place where people have the ability to animate objects or walk through mirrors to sort of transport themselves. And then on another arc, you have people who can make space out of nothing. Anyway, my explanation of the magic system really doesn't live up to how good it is in actuality. But anyway, the book centers around a girl called Ophelia who comes from Anima, and she is forced to marry Mr. Thorn, who comes from the pole. It's rather unusual for people from different arcs to get married, and so quickly Ophelia starts to realize that she's just another pawn in a scheme that is larger than she could have ever expected. I have really enjoyed the first two books. I'm waiting for the third one to be published. That one I think will come out in September. But the writing is beautiful as well, and it's just so well thought out. Then another one that I had for you was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I have read quite a huge chunk of it. It's a really long story. It has about, I think, 800 pages. It's basically this huge novel that is centered around a couple of characters who have their own storyline. The world in which this book is set is divided. There are wars, dragons, ancient enemies, scheming and assassins at the court, and there's just a lot going on in this book. And like I said before, I think I read about 250 pages of this, and it was really interesting, though a bit confusing because there's so many characters. But you just have to consult at the back of the book. You have an entire list of all the characters and a small biography there, so you should be good if you consult that frequently. Moving on, my final recommendation is His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, and I actually haven't read this one, but I am recommending it because I have gotten this book recommended to me quite a lot, as well as the second trilogy, Book of Dust. Also, recently there was a TV series about His Dark Materials, so I think that would be a nice thing to perhaps pair together. So I hope that you haven't already read all of these books. Jazz says, this is so lovely, diverse LGBTQ plus books that include casually queer characters, but the focus is on something else. So I thought about Upright Women by Sarah Gailey. Now this is a novella that is set in the future in which the American Southwest is filled with bandits, fascists, and queer librarians. You follow Esther, who was in love with her best friend, who eventually got executed. Esther becomes a stowaway. She hides herself in a librarian's book wagon because she is fleeing from a marriage her father has been trying to arrange for her. The thing also is the man that she was supposed to marry was actually previously engaged to her best friend. So, pretty awkward. Then jazz, I would also recommend the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire, and I've actually spoken a lot about this series on my channel. To keep it really short, it's about kids who find these doors to worlds that are perfect for them. After having stayed there for some time, some of them eventually leave or are forced to go back to their original world. And as you can imagine, that's very devastating for a lot of these kids, and so they try to find their way back. But in the meantime, they stay at this boarding school that is run by Eleanor, a person who also found a door when she was a child. There is a lot of rep in this series. You have people who are asexual, pansexual, trans, gay, and their sexuality or gender are never the center of the story. It's really about trying to find their way back home. If you would like to know more about the specific books, then you can always check out my reviews. Another book that came to mind was The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. I'm sure you must have heard of this one, Jazz. It's set in Paris 1889, and you have this powerful institute called the Order of Babel, and this order is split into several houses. Now, 2 of these houses have fallen already. Now, the story centers around Severin and his group of friends who all have different talents and expertise. Now, the thing with Severin is that he believes that he is the rightful heir to one of these houses. And that's what this story is about, he and his friends trying to get his true inheritance. And then I also had to recommend Pet by Kweke Emezi because this is one of my favorite books. It's about this trans girl called Jam who finds this creature called Pet who says he's on the hunt for monsters in her town and says that there's a monster in her best friend Redemption's house. And that's what the story is all about. For me, this was a very quick and enjoyable read, and Jam being transgender or selectively mute is never the center of the story. So yeah, those were all of my recommendations for you. Okay, so I'm going to do these 2 together. Ekaterina says, something cozy and warm and lovely and soothing to lose, forget oneself in would be lovely now. Thank you, take care of your mental health, XX. And Melissa says, you're the best, thank you. I'm struggling so hard at the moment. I haven't been in the best mental space before all of this started. Now I don't even know how to get my anxiety under control again. I can't really focus on reading books either, at least normal books that is. So how do you feel about recommending some graphic novels? First, Ekaterina and Melissa, thank you so much for both of your messages. Melissa, I'm so sorry to hear that you haven't been in the best mental space recently, but I hope that you're doing a bit better now. I found a couple of cozy and cute comics for the both of you. So the first one I have for you 2 is Lumberjanes, and this is basically about a group of Girl Scouts who go on adventures. It is super cute and wholesome. It's really centered around friendship and being there for one another. And yeah, the adventures are super fun and interesting, and I love the art as well. It's so cute. So that's one I would recommend. I also have Goldie Vance by Hope Larson and Brittany Williams, and this comic is about Goldie, whose father is a manager of a Miami resort, and she dreams to become the resort's in-house detective. This job has actually already been taken by Walter, but that doesn't stop Goldie. Together with her best friend Cheryl and with Walter, albeit grudgingly, they try and solve mysteries. The next one I have for you is Misfit City by Kirsten Smith, and this is apparently the female version of The Goonies. I haven't watched that movie, but apparently it's about this group of boys who find this treasure map and try and find the treasure. Anyway, Misfit City is about a girl named Wilder who lives in a town where the movie The Gloomies was filmed, which was about a group of kids going on a treasure map adventure. Anyway, one day Wilder actually finds a real centuries-old pirate treasure map, and so together with her friends, she goes on an adventure to find the treasure. Then I would also like to recommend the Avatar: The Last Airbender comics because I have really enjoyed the ones that I've read. I think that if you're a fan of Avatar, you'll really enjoy it. For instance, there's this one comic that focuses on what happened to Zuko's mother, which I thought was wildly interesting, so I would definitely recommend these. And then I still had one specific one for Ekaterina, A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And this is a story about a girl named Sarah who is an excellent student, but then her much adored father passes away and she is left penniless and is banished to a room in the attic. She has to go through a lot of hardship working as a servant, but this story is really about her resourcefulness and how she manages to turn things around. Now, I personally haven't read this story yet, but I heard from a lot of people that they thought this was a very endearing and cozy story. Then Taco Cat said, I don't read many biographies, memoirs, but 3 of my favorite books are Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, Haben, The Deaf-Blind Woman Who Conquered Harvard Law by Haben Girma, Bruce Perry, and Maya Shalavitz. Oh, and favorite author N.K. Jemisin. Okay, so when you said The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, I immediately thought of Lakewood by Megan Giddings, because that book was actually inspired by the story of Henrietta Lacks, and it's about this African American girl who is studying at college and then her grandmother dies, and then it's revealed that the debt that her family has is larger than they had expected, so she has to drop out of college to find some work in order to support her family, and so she joins a research experiment, and it seems to be far more sinister than she had expected. I read this book a couple of months ago, I think now, and also talked to the author, and yeah, it's really great. I think that if you like The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, that you would definitely appreciate this book as well. So yeah, that's why I'm recommending this one. Taco Cat, you also mentioned Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, and that got me thinking about Ayoade on Top by Richard Ayoade. Okay, now this book apparently is a definitive analysis of Gwyneth Paltrow's cabin crew dramedy film View from the Top. So one thing that you should know is that Richard is actually a very famous British comedian, and I think that if you really vibe with his sense of humor, that you'll really enjoy this book. So if you don't know him, I would definitely suggest watching a couple of his YouTube videos and seeing how you feel about him. Then a memoir that I really enjoyed was We Are Displaced by Malala Yousafzai, and it actually consists of 2 parts. The first part is Malala basically recounting her life, and the second part consists of various stories from women who have been displaced. I thought this was incredibly interesting and insightful. I actually have a full review of this on my channel, so if you're interested in knowing more about this, then I would definitely recommend you watch that video. Then Bolu asked for books with queer male characters, and the first one that I would like to recommend is Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. I should also note that this book is also poetry. Either way, it is about this boy who is trying to come to terms with his identity being a mixed race and gay teen. Then eventually at university he finds his wings as a drag artist, calling himself the Black Flamingo. Another one that I had for you, Bolu, was How to Be Remy Cameron by Julian Winters. This book centers around Remy, who is openly gay, and people on campus see him as this very confident person. Then at some point Remy gets assigned to write an essay describing himself, and so he goes on a journey to reconcile with the labels that people have given him. Then the last one I would like to recommend to you is Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jedrowski. It is a novel that is set in the early 1980s in Poland, and it is a story about first love between 2 young men. The conflict here is that they find themselves on opposite sides of the political aisle. Now, I myself haven't read this book, but I've been wanting to read more queer literature, and finding one that is set in Eastern Europe during a time that I'm not too familiar with really appealed to me. So yeah, that's why I'm recommending it to you. So I have a lot more recommendations to go, but I will do those in future videos. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.